Welcome, Bronco Nation, my game review for Boise State versus Oregon State, number 11. Boise State getting the win 34-18 against Oregon State. This was a historic win for Boise State because it means they have now finished their regular season 11-1, the first time since 2019, and before that 2011 that a Boise State team has finished the year 11-1. They are now putting themselves in standing with very, very few Boise State teams, a very elite group of Boise State programs, and this Boise State team was able to do that. Now, it could have been a much more dominant win, 34-18. Below what I was predicting. I was predicting 50-23. And we'll talk about how it was almost that score. But there were a couple of you that were really close on your score predictions. And the closest one was Harold Benjamin Welch IV, 34-17 point score prediction, only 1 point off. That's probably the closest I think anybody has been this year without actually exactly nailing it. So fantastic job there. But like I said, even though it's a 16-point win, Bronco Nation not necessarily thrilled by the results of this win because Boise State definitely looked like they were shooting themselves in the foot at times. Definitely could have been a more dominant performance. Now, I'm going to say that, again, we're excited that they won. We should be. Again, finishing out 11-1. Like Meg Sanford is always saying, just win. Boise State is now guaranteed, if they beat UNLV, to make the CFP. They didn't, at any point in this game, look like they were going to stumble. They definitely looked like they controlled the matchup throughout. Oregon State never taking a lead in this, never tying the game in this matchup. However, 16-point win, definitely below what fans were expecting this, below what Vegas was predicting. Right before kickoff, it had dropped to a 19.5 point spread, but so 3.5 points below that, below my own score prediction. But when we think back over the last 3 games, okay, Nevada, a 1 touchdown game. San Jose State, which was a 1 possession game until late in the fourth quarter. And then last week versus Wyoming, you have a 4-point spread, right? 17-13, 4-point win. So Boise State has had 3 games in a row where for the majority of the matchup, it was anybody's game. And that was not the case today. So Boise State definitely took a step forward. They won by a clear-cut 2 possessions, which again is not something you could say for 2 out of the last 3 games. And honestly, except for a pick 6 at the end there and a huge miscue by Wyoming, by San Jose State, was not the case versus San Jose State. They were able to get away with a clear-cut 2 possession win. But we are going to talk about some things here that Boise State did that took down the potential of this. It would have been nice on the big national scale, national television audience, to go out and get that huge, dominant Boise State days of old, Boise State days of the first half of the season type of win. And unlike the first half of the season where Boise State was able to complete those drives, Boise State kicked themselves a couple times in the second half. So we're going to look at that. So looking at the first half for Boise State, it was an amazing game in the first half for Maddox Madsen. Maddox Madsen finishing the day 17-33 for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns, also rushed 8 carries for 37 yards and a touchdown. But in the first half, he was 13 of 19 for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a huge game there in the first half, wrapping off the first drive with a great touchdown pass to Bolt on the crosser, where Boise State had come out and established the run with Ashton Genty with 4 straight runs, including a big 16-yarder there, second run of the game for him, and then setting up the passing plays there and getting that first down, that touchdown there. Ashton Genty also getting a first down on that drive by the skin of the football. So something's not quite bouncing Boise State's way in the second half. In the first half, getting just enough to stay in it there on that first drive. It was probably the closest conversion I've ever seen. I mean, literally, you pulled the chains out, and it was by the breath of the football that he converted, and Boise State's able to go down and score. And then they score on their second. Now they're opening up 14-0. Didn't do that last week. Didn't do it versus San Jose State. Boise State opens up 14-0 on the second drive. Ashton Genty able to power in for a touchdown. Not that it was a perfect drive. Cam Camper missed a wide open touchdown pass. Would have been a 50, 45, 50-plus yard touchdown pass, 30 to 40 yards of it through the air. It would have been a beautiful, it was a beautiful throw. Easiest catch he was going to make all season long. Should have ran it in for a touchdown. Would have been a big momentum swing. I think would have jump-started the passing game for sure. And unfortunately dropped it. But Maddox Matson able to make up for it with his legs, scrambling and then also pushing it in for a first down, and then Ashton Jeanty being able to power it in for a touchdown, and definitely looking a lot fresher in this game. The brace was off. He was wearing like a compression sleeve on the left arm. That sleeve still not 100%. I just saw a couple of drives later. Boise State not able to score on drive number 3, had to punt, but then drive number 4, they looked like they were going to go down and score again. I mean, Ashton Jeanty had just broke off another big run and then fumbles in the red zone. Just carrying the ball in the left arm. It's that second time he's fumbled, and both times have been after the UNLV game with the ball in that right arm. Sorry, right arm, not left arm. No, it is left arm. Sorry. Yeah, ball in the left arm. Got myself mixed up for a second there. Ball in the left arm again, and unfortunately fumbled in the red zone there and took away a potential score for Boise State. And then Oregon State jumped on that. They were down 14-0, but now they've made a big play. What did they come out the next drive? They come out and they score an 83-yard touchdown run. Hankerson, one of the guys I talked about as a key player for Oregon State, he explodes right side. It's pretty open. He gets past the first and second line there pretty easily. Notarani is a little bit out of position, unfortunately, and then the secondary just isn't there, and he runs all the way down for 83-yard touchdown run. Now it's 14-7, and Ashton Jeanty, your leader, just fumbled. And Boise State is now struggling to pick up momentum. They scored on the first 2 drives. They've gone out on the last 2. A punt and a fumble now, and Oregon State has all the momentum. All of the energy is now on their sides. And what does Maddox Matson and his Boise State offense do? Well, they do what they've done time and time again. When a pick's been thrown versus Georgia Southern, he comes back out. When all the momentum is down against them versus Nevada, and he comes out and leads a long touchdown drive, well, he does the same thing. It's 75 yards, where 71 out of 75 of those yards are from Maddox Matson's arm or his legs. Only one run by Ashton Jeanty, a 4-yard run, and Maddox Matson leads Boise State all the way down into the end zone despite a drop by, unfortunately, Austin Bolt drops a touchdown in the end zone. A great throw, gets just slammed by the defender. It's not an easy catch to make, but it was definitely one that was in his hands, and despite the drop, great throw on the outside to Caples, wide open for a touchdown. 71 out of 75 yards. Boise State takes the momentum back. That was so huge. This was a game that in the second half, Boise State did not open up the way that they should have, the way that they needed to. They did not finish the game that they needed to, but because Boise State came down before the end of the half, stalled Oregon State out, took their momentum away with that long touchdown offensive score and drive by Maddox Matson, this Boise State offense, they were able to retake possession of this game, and they maintained that throughout the rest of the matchup. Oregon State definitely looking more and more desperate as the game would go on from that point out. Now, second half, we talked about first half, and that's pretty dominant first half, right? 3 out of your 5 drives, touchdowns. Would have been 4 out of 5 if not for a fumble. So one miscue, but only one punt, and Boise State is up 21-7, all the momentum on their side. Boise State still has a chance to make this a blowout win. It looks like it's trending that way. Second half, Boise State drives all the way down into the red zone. A great pass to Austin Bolt. He makes up for that drop in the end zone. He survives a massive hit for a conversion. Ashton Jeanty is running the ball. The quarterback scramble is working, and then Ashton Jeanty breaks one like he does. He breaks one of those incredible 2 or 3 tackles through the inside, bounces outside, the speed to the end zone through a face mask. He has scored. Boise State's now up 28-7. Like I said, all the momentum is on their side. This is going to be the blowout we expected. There's another highlight reel touchdown for him that Fox can play on their Twitter. And there's a flag. And it's a hold on Strawn. Little bit of, they said there's holding on every play. You look at that one, it didn't seem egregious. I could see the argument. I'm not going to say that it was a bogus call per se, but definitely I think a ticky-tack call, and the run is the incredible run by Ashton Jeanty is removed. 2 incomplete passes later, where there's just nobody open. Maddox Matson has to throw it away. Boise State ends up having to kick a field goal on that drive. Okay, fine, whatever. Shake it off. Yeah, they still stop. They still stop Oregon State from scoring a touchdown on their drive defensively. So Boise State's got an opportunity. Okay, it's evened out again, field goal versus field goal. All right, they'll come back out in the second drive. It's another great drive. Ashton Jeanty does it again. This time no holding. Long 61-yard run, 2 to 3 broken tackles, and the speed, the safety barely gets him, just has the angle and is deep enough to come back. But Ashton Jeanty brings the ball all the way into the red zone, and Boise State's ready to go again. And then again, two incomplete plays. And so Max Matson in the passing game, very much on target, very much feeding the rhythm. I tweeted out that Max Matson looked like he was playing with a swagger that we hadn't seen out of him really since last season. And something changed over halftime. There were adjustments made by Oregon State. Their coverage was certainly better. But Max Matson also didn't look as confident in the second half. I think a little bit of not the pressure per se, because when the pressure's on, when he knows he needs to go out and do it, we see that drive number 5, he leads them down 71 out of 75 yards and a touchdown. When he has to do it, he's going to go score. But I think there's an element there when you're trying to manage the game and you know you have the win and you're just trying to maintain that, and it's not a win or lose type of situation. It's we need to hold on to the ball. I can't throw these high risk, high reward type of opportunities. You start to second guess yourself a little bit. I think part of it was the coverage. I also think part of it was just second half. Max Matson just didn't look as on target and didn't look as mentally confident as he did in the first half. We saw that was on the first 2 drives. Now, the drive number 1, it was holding that ruined that. Drive number 2, Max Matson, the wide receiver, just not necessarily on the same page. Good coverage, nobody open. Unfortunately, has to kick that field goal. And then Boise State has a couple of disappointing drives there that end in a punt and a 4-and-out situation. Another one of those drives where the drive number 3, there's another drop, another deep ball. Now, could Max Matson have floated that ball a little bit deeper ahead of Camper? Sure, he could have, but the timing had been off on a couple of those. He'd already thrown a deep ball to Camper that he had floated ahead of him, and for whatever reason, they just hadn't been able to connect. And so he throws somewhat more of a bullet pass straight to Camper. I mean, it's still a great pass. Camper just needs to keep running up the outside like he was doing before. And the ball's going to hit him right in the hands. And I think he fears that the corner's maybe going to intercept it. I think he misjudges some of the trajectory of the ball. He comes inside a little bit to try and position. Corner's able to catch up. And unfortunately, he's only able to get one hand on it. It's incomplete. And I would put that a lot more on Camper than I would on Matson. You can argue about the type of throw that he could have made, but the throw he did make was a good one, and it hit Camper in the hands, and it was another. I mean, Camper had a great game in this one. Don't get me wrong. He led receivers 6 of 73. He was crucial especially on that long 75-yard drive. A lot of key catches on that. He made up for a lot of his miscues, but it wasn't a perfect game from him, just like it wasn't a perfect game from Max Matson. And then drive number 4, Ashton Jeanty and Boise State, they get it down to the 5-yard line, including a great play action pass to Louder, 30-plus yards. Louder hurdling his way down. And at this point, Boise State's pretty clearly going to win this game. And it looked like there was a little bit of a sacrificing of the scoreboard for the Heisman campaign. Boise State now just tries to power it in. Gets behind Ashton Jeanty. They just try to power it in. 2 straight runs with Ashton Jeanty. Not very creative. Everybody knows the ball's going to him. I would like to see maybe a play action or a screen or something like we were seeing in the first half, where you see those underneath shallow crossing routes to Bolt or to Caples. That would have, I think, worked better in that situation. Boise State gets uncreative in that drive. They're just trying to give Ashton Jeanty the touchdown that he has so truly earned when they don't really need the points in this situation. At this point, Oregon State has lost the game, and they're just trying to get the Heisman moment, and unable to score. 2 straight drives, 2 straight runs, unable to do anything with it. And then they try on 3rd down, they try a throw to the corner. Camper is just unable to get the ball down in bounds. Max Matson does give his guy an opportunity. There's nobody open. He gives Camper a chance. Camper goes up and gets it, but then gets hit out of bounds. And then on the 4th down play, it looked like they were trying to actually throw the screen pass or the short out route to Jeanty. He's covered up. Max Matson goes to his second guy, which I believe is the tight end in the corner. He's not open. Goes to the 3rd player, which at this point is Caples coming across the back end zone. Throws a beautiful pass right over the top of the defender, almost deflected, maybe got a finger on it, but does get it over the top of the tall safety or corner, whoever it was in the back of the end zone there. And unfortunately, it's a great throw to get over the top. There's just not enough field to work with, and Caples ends up about 6 inches, a yard out of bounds, unfortunately, on that. But drive number 5. Boise State able to end this game the way they should. Huge run by Ashton Jeanty on the outside pitch, gets it down 26 yards after a turnover on downs by Oregon State. Boise State could have kneeled the ball down at this point, but they wanted the style points and they wanted the opportunities for Ashton Jeanty. Again, Boise State down at the goal line. They've tried to slam it in on 3 straight times, and Ashton Jeanty's been stopped. 4th time, This time they go for the scoreboard. Let's finish the game with those style points and the momentum. You don't want to end after everything you've done. You've turned a lot of things around in this game compared to the last three. Boise State looked like a much different team. Yeah, there were some miscues. There were some holding calls. There was a fumble. There were some missed passes. Most of those in the second half. But you've played much better. You've looked like a much more dominant team. What we kind of started to expect from this team throughout the season. Maybe not what we saw in the first half of the year. Definitely not the performance we saw versus Washington State, but definitely what we would expect out of a ranked Boise State team versus a bad 5-6 Oregon State program. You would expect a strong, dominant performance. And for the most part, few miscues aside, you've seen that, but you don't want to end on a fourth down stop in the red zone on the last play of the game. You don't want to do that. And Boise State could have handed off to Ashton Jeanty. Maybe he gets in, maybe he doesn't. He's been stopped 3 times before. Instead, it's a great play call. Scoreboard over the Heisman in this moment. Max Madsen pulls it out of the belly of the back on the option. They read it pretty well. There's 3 defenders, and Maddox Madsen, again, some great start to the game, a little bit of rough in the second half. But he shows the heart when he needs it, when the team needs it. On the crucial moment, he's able to put it in the end zone. Jukes 2 defenders, powers through a third one into the end zone for a score, and finishes with a touchdown. Boise State gets this game 34-18. And so Ashton Jeanty, Heisman moment again for him, 37 carries, which is the most he's carried. I am worried about that number because he took a lot of pops in this game, and now we have a short week. And we played on a Friday. Well, you only have a Friday. It's not like you get an additional day. Boise State's playing in the Mountain West Championship game on Friday. We'll have the game preview for that probably coming out on Sunday. Planning to do a live preview. It's going to be a fun one. But however, Boise State, with Ashton Jeanty, they now have a very, very worked out Ashton Jeanty coming into this game. And part of the reason he looked so fresh coming into this matchup from last week is versus Wyoming. He only had 19 carries. It was one of the few games he'd had. He'd always 30-plus carries throughout the last 3 or 4 games. But coming into this one, he finally got an opportunity to not rest like we did before in the first half of the season where he was sitting for a whole half, but not to be overworked throughout the game. Well, in this game, he ends up getting overworked again, 37 carries. It's a big one for him. He wanted it clearly. Boise State went to him when they didn't necessarily have to. They had times where the passing game was working, or they could have been more creative in the red zone, but they knew the national stage. They knew, of course, his own goals with the Heisman, and that's the team's goals as well. And they really went to Ashton Jeanty to try and prop him up for that. And so 37 carries in this game, and he put up the numbers: 226 yards, 6.1 yard average, a touchdown. He had a lot of carries in the second half, 21 carries, 106 yards, and 5-yard average in the first half. So he was already coming into this second half with more carries than he'd had in the first half of last week's game. And they put the work into him in the second half. Again, it's 37 carries for 226 yards, and it's a great performance. But I do worry about how that may impact him versus UNLV, which of course is the game that he got injured in to begin with. So how is he going to play against one of the best linebackers in the country in Woodyard across the end there? Good UNLV offense and defense. Boise State's going to need to play at their top level. Yes, it's at home. They'll have the advantage of the home crowd. They beat them already, but it's tough to play a team twice in a season. And now I am assuming UNLV. They could lose to Nevada, and Colorado State could win today versus Utah State, and then it would be Colorado State, which I would definitely prefer. But either way, you're going to play a better team than you've played the last few games. Of ranking record-wise, it's better than any of the teams from Nevada through Oregon State that Boise State has played, and it's going to be somewhat of a challenge, and Boise State's going to need their best performance. And Ashton Jeanty putting those kind of numbers on him today, especially in moments where you didn't have to, again, I think it's his choice, and it was. But we'll have to see how that ends up playing out for Boise State in the conference championship game here in a week. We already talked about Max Madsen and Ashton Jeanty. Just to wrap up the offensive side here, there was a good performance all across the board here. Not as many wide receivers and tight ends thrown to as we've seen the last couple of weeks, or at least last week, especially versus San Jose State, and then even last week versus Wyoming. But Boise State still, it wasn't like what we saw versus Nevada, where you only had one guy catching the ball. So Boise State ended up throwing the ball to Camper. We already talked about his numbers. Louder had a couple of nice catches, including that one. There's like a 30-plus yards run 3 catches for 45 yards. Caples had another big game. He has definitely come on strong the second half of the season. Something I was not tracking is that Caples is actually going to be able to come back next season. He has one more year of eligibility. It's going to be huge. He wasn't really able to be himself this season. He's still dealing with some injuries that he took on the front end of the year. I think his leadership and his playmaking ability will be a big boost for next year's offense. 4 receptions for 33 yards, and then Bolt had 2 catches for 28, including a touchdown. Ben Ford had a great catch there on drive number 1 that kept the drive alive, allowed the 4th down attempt there by Ashton Genty. So Ben Ford, a little used local product that had a great performance with that one catch that ended up setting Boise State up for that score. And then Prince Strawn had 1 reception for 8 yards. So overall for Boise State, 272 yards in the first half, 135 yards passing, 137 yards rushing. It's kind of what you want to see, the balanced attack system. Second half, Boise State only 60 yards passing in the second half. Definitely not the same passing performance we saw in the first half. Part of that, the position Boise State was in, a couple of holding plays that wiped out big plays for Boise State, put them into obvious passing situations, and Boise State just not able to convert those. And then just a couple of miscues between just the connection between Madsen and the receivers, and Madsen just not being as confident there in the second half, but he made up for it on that final drive. But Boise State definitely emphasizing the run game. 270 yards rushing overall, so over 130 plus yards rushing in the second half for 465 yards of offense. So grading this performance for Boise State, going to give it a solid B plus performance offensively. If you're just looking at the first half, it gets an A minus for sure, maybe even a solid A besides that one fumble. But the second half for Boise State, couple of field goals, couple of missed opportunities, couple of drives ending inside the red zone, 1 in 4th and out, but Boise State finishes the right way and puts up almost 500 yards of offense, so solid B+. All right, moving on to the defense for Boise State. I think that's a big story to this game. Boise State's defense was really, really good in this matchup. I thought they have struggled. I think everybody has thought that they have struggled the last few weeks, especially against the pass. That's a big element that Boise State has struggled to stop. And there were some concerns coming up against Oregon State because Oregon State does have a better passing quarterback, passing wide receivers system overall, better passing system than Wyoming does. I mean, that's just a fact. Wyoming just doesn't have the playmakers for it, and they were able to pass all over Boise State at times. But in this game, that's not what we saw. And Boise State opened up this game really, really strong. 2 straight 3-and-outs forced punts, and then 3 straight punts overall to start this game. A couple of really nice moments. The crowd getting involved. That first drive, 2 false starts that were key to that. Some good coverage on the deep ball. Overall, there were the deep pass was not open. That Oregon State went to it. They've definitely identified. I think every team that faces Boise State has identified that as a weakness. I think that's certainly fair with what we've seen, but it wasn't today. Regardless of who they were throwing against, whether it was the safeties or McCoy or Irby, the deep ball, the actual deep ball was covered. There were a couple times where, especially in the second half, where the 20-yard out, the 20-yard outs and the corners, that's what I'm trying to think of, 20-yard corners, those routes were open a few times there in the second half, but the true go routes, or the deep skinny posts or whatever, those were not open. And Boise State did a great job of covering those, including on that first drive. On the second drive, Martin McCoy almost had a pick. I mean, it was in his hands. I mean, we're not going to say it was this close. It was in both of his hands, and it should have been a pick 6. And he actually had 3 near picks. That would have been the easiest one. There were 2 other ones where the ball batted around in his hands. It would have been somewhat miraculous if he caught them, but he did have 2 other opportunities. But in this one, this was the easiest one of the night, and it should have been a pick 6, but it was a great play on the ball and forces at punt. And then drive number 3, a lot of that was really, Boise State was not the only one that dealt with fouls in this game. Oregon State, a couple of unforced errors on their end, a holding call that wipes out a big first down, and then a shift, an illegal shift where 2 players are in motion. I know Oregon State fans will probably try to debate it, but it was pretty clear on replay that the wide receiver was moving back while the other one was in motion, or the running back, whoever it was in motion. And that also wiped out a big play. They'd managed to convert like a 2nd and 23 on a screen pass and wipes out first down. So both those, and then a swarming sack started by Gums. I believe it was finished by Freely. Freely ends up being a forced punt there. So 3 straight drives. That was huge. That allowed Boise State to gain those quick scores that we talked about as keys to the game, gain those quick scores, start the game 14-0, And then, even though Oregon State had some opportunities to come back, the way Boise State started this game impacted the end result massively. Yeah, Boise, they are able to go then score after that fumble. Big momentum changing play. But that's really the only good thing they did on offense in the first half. 160 yards of total offense in the first half. If you take out an 83-yard touchdown run, which came off of a miscue by Boise State and was one of the few times they were out of position on the run, they only gave up 77 yards of offense in the first half. I mean, this was a dominant defensive performance for Boise State in the first half versus Oregon State. Now that run, again, yeah, that was bad. I had cautioned against some of the vulnerabilities Boise State was showing in the running game that we saw versus Wyoming. I said that was a concern for me. That does concern me. That 83-yard run there for the touchdown. They did look at times, even before that run, some of them were called back by holding, but they looked decently vulnerable versus the run in the first half. But Boise State, first half, they were able to get out of there with only one score allowed. It's 21-7. And so on 4 out of the 5 drives, they're either punts or end of the half. So just punts or turnovers on down type situation and one score. That is a dominant performance. Second half, Oregon State definitely came to play. Oregon State definitely came to play in the second half. The first 2 drives end in a punt and a field goal. But then Oregon State is able to get it going on drive number 3. Part of that is a wide open deep ball there against McCoy, unfortunately, a 20-yard plus reception. Not the deep ball variety like we're talking about, but one of those corner out route type situations. A flea flicker gets stopped for just barely 9 yards. So Boise State doing a good job this year. A couple of teams have gone after them. Only one has been successful of actually converting the flea flicker, but a couple of teams have gone after Boise State. So for whatever reason, that's been diagnosed as a weakness because at least 3 teams have attempted to run the flea flicker versus Boise State. Of course, San Jose State, that was one of their catastrophic errors, was the attempt at the flea flicker and just wasn't able to get the ball back. So they have at least, not really flea flicker in that case because it was the quarterback throwing it back to the wide receiver, but it was pretty close to a flea flicker. It wasn't a true lateral type situation. But anyhow, that form of play where it's a pass back to the wide receiver to throw down or the flea flicker where it's a pass back to the quarterback, whatever it is, it's been attempted against Boise State multiple times this season. Boise State's done a great job overall of stopping it. They did so in this one as well. Yeah, they allowed a 9-yard completion, but they didn't allow the deep ball. Again, Boise State, if you're looking defensively for things that were improved upon in this game, positive momentum moving forward, right? We talked about the offense. It could have been better. Yes, but there were positive changes made. Defense, yeah, sure, it could have been better, especially times the second half. But overall, that's a positive improvement, stopping those deep passes, which were such an Achilles heel for them the last few games. I wouldn't even say last few games, this entire season pretty much. Not available there. They do end up being able to score on just a video game type of play. The wide receiver jukes out 3 different players, stiff arms, I believe McCoy, and then jukes out 2 safeties, both Benefield and Washington, and is able to just run into the end zone. It did look like a video game play. Definitely one of the highlights of the night. Unfortunately, Oregon State got that opportunity. But really, besides that, Boise State did a great job. They allow that touchdown. They allow a field goal. But then the next 3 drives are all turnovers on downs. All turnovers on downs for Oregon State. And so the defensively for Boise State, I thought they did really, really well. There were some huge individual moments. A key on that in the drive number 4, drive number 5, Oregon State still hanging around in this thing. Boise State, maybe they go down and score, and they can pull this thing within a score, and then who knows what happens. They did just attempt an onside kick, which they were very close to recovering. So maybe they go down and are able to convert. But Simpson, drive number 5, he's back in this game. Boise State's defense looked better this week. I think a big part of it was having Andrew Simpson back there, a leader, one of the key playmakers on defense for Boise State. And on drive number 5, he's able to go down there with pressure in the face of the quarterback, force a bad throw on an open wide receiver. He's just not able to get it to, and Boise State's able to force a 4-and-out in that situation. Again, there were some great individual efforts throughout this game. I thought McCoy, you saw me mention him a couple of times as being the victim of some of those mid-range throws, but he stopped a lot of deep balls. He made some he had at least 4, the stats on ESPN say 3 passes deflected. I counted 4. So I think that's an error on ESPN's part. He had 3 balls that were almost picked and one right there on one of the last drives, the very last drive actually, had another near pick and then a clear pass defended, only one hand in, but just swatted it completely out of the way of the receiver there on drive number 6 to end the game. He played great. I thought this was his best game of the season. 8 tackles, 3 passes defended. Again, I counted 4, 3 near picks, and he's struggled the last couple of weeks because I think he's just been having to cover the best receivers. We really saw him having a rough game versus San Jose State, and he was beat a couple of times. Well, a couple of times, to be honest. He was beat quite a few times deep, but not today. He recovered today, and he had the best game of his career. I think this was the best game of his season. I thought this was one of the best games of his entire career. This was a big reason Boise State walks away with this one with a win, and a good win at that, scoreboard-wise, is because of Amari McCoy and his performance in this one. And then I thought Banks, he got beat. He was a 2 or 3 of these on the second half for Oregon State, where they did pick up the game passing. First half, only 49 yards passing. They finished the game with 226 yards passing. So over 150, 170, close to, right? If I'm doing my math right, public math. But, close to 150 plus yards passing in the second half. And unfortunately, Banks was the target of a lot of those. He started trying to throw more to his side. But even though a couple of those times he did allow the big play, almost every single one of those drives, he ended up making a crucial play that made up for it. He ended up making a big tackle on the screen or coming down and stopping a wide receiver short on a third down type of play. And so Boise State overall, that bend but don't break and that short mindset where, you give up an opportunity, but you come back the next one, you make that big play. I thought we saw a lot of that out of this game tonight. Hassanin, I thought, had a great game, big influencer there. Him and JVM, neither of them really accounted for a lot of stats. Hassanin only 3 tackles and a tackle for loss. JVM, I think, had like 1 or 2 tackles to his name, no sacks. However, despite the fact that their statistics were low, there was a lot of pressure. Boise State only getting 2 sacks in this game, but they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and disrupted a lot of throws that Oregon State just wasn't able to make up for. And so even though the sacks are no longer quite getting through as quickly and at the same rate they were earlier on in the season, the effectiveness of the pressure is still there. Then a couple other guys that just didn't have, like I said, the statistical performance, but had a big impact on this game. Simpson, Gums, Freely, and like I said, Jaden Virgin Morgan. I thought all of those guys had a big impact in this matchup. So overall for Boise State defensively, I thought this was a great game for them. Again, they only allowed 342 yards of offense overall. Yeah, they gave up 150 plus yards passing in the second half, but only 5 yards rushing. They got burned in the first half, rushing wise. They give up that big 83-yard run, and there was a couple other decent runs, especially those ones called back for holding. So Oregon State was finding holes against Boise State's defense in the first half. However, second half, 5 yards allowed. They give up 111 yards rushing in the first half. They end the game with only 116 yards rushing. That's back-to-back games that Boise State has allowed over 100 yards in the first half, but then under 15 yards rushing in the second half. Only 14 yards allowed versus Wyoming, and then 5 yards allowed versus Oregon State. The adjustments by Chenander this season have been incredible. I really have, there's issues with Boise State's defense. There certainly are. The secondary is a cause for concern. I definitely agree with that. But the adjustments that Chenander has been able to make with the pieces that he has on this defense to put them in the spot where they have the best chance of succeeding, even if they have been burned in the first half or there's a lot of momentum for the offense in a certain position or area. He has done an incredible job of making the adjustments that Boise State needs to make to be able to come out and win these games and to limit the offensive production. It's been a big part of Boise State winning these matchups. So incredible job by Boise State making those adjustments, stopping the running game. They allowed a few more passes, but they shut down the run, which I think was a big part of what was giving Oregon State that opportunity in the first half. And they took that away, forced them to the air, where it just hasn't been their strong point. This is a running team for Oregon State. This is an Oregon State team that coming into this game, like we said, was averaging, rushing-wise, coming into this game, they were averaging 199 yards per game rushing, 199.2 yards rushing per game coming into this matchup. And Boise State held them to 116 yards overall. And again, only 5 yards, a rushing team, almost 200 yards a game, held them to only 5 yards in the second half and did not give up a ton of deep passes, really only a few, and most of them on one drive that ended up going down and scoring. And so I thought it was an outstanding job overall for this Boise State defense. I thought that they fixed some issues in this game with their coverage. Hopefully we see that continued next week into UNLV. And I thought that they made a great adjustments. I thought there were some great individual player performances as well. And really just overall great team defense played in that secondary for Boise State. So overall, I'm going to give them a solid A performance for this Boise State defense. Solid A performance for Boise State's defense. And so to wrap up here with the special teams and then the keys to the game. For the special teams, Boise State getting an opportunity to really use their kickers in this game. James Ferguson Reynolds, Jonah Dalmas, 2 of 2 for long of 43. Remember that coming into this game, he was coming off back-to-back games where he had missed a field goal. In his last 5 games, he'd only had 2 games where he had attempted field goals. He'd had 3 games where he hadn't even attempted a field goal. 5 games where he had two of those, in only 2 of his last 5 games, he had attempted a field goal, and he was 1 for 3 in his last 5 games. He was definitely not looking himself. He was definitely looking a little jumpy back there, just looked off a little bit mentally, and he was able to come down and be a big performance, a big part of the performance in this game, a big impactor in this matchup. I don't like when Boise State's drives stall out. I want them to score a touchdown every single time. It's great that we haven't had to use him for a large part of this season. It's his lowest kicking performance of the year, and it's not because we don't trust him. He's still the Jonah Dalmas that we all know and love, but we just haven't had to use him. And I think that the rust from just not being used has started to wear up, started to build up a little bit for Jonah Dalmas. And so again, I don't like that we don't end in touchdowns, but you know what? Those 2 drives where we had to go to Jonah Dalmas and we said, we haven't won this game yet. We are still in this. This is still a key moment. There is still pressure on you. Go out and make these kicks. And he did. I think was a huge boost to Boise State in being able to restore some confidence for this kicking game and for Jonah Dalmas, which I think is going to be essential. He is going to need to have trust in his leg and have it all ironed out for him when he goes and plays teams like UNLV in the Mountain West Championship game or the playoffs to come. We need a kicker who is confident like we've seen throughout his entire career. We didn't necessarily see that version of Jonah Dalmas the last couple of weeks, but we saw it tonight. I think making a field goal that he missed last week, almost the exact same look, 43 yards from the left hash, and he made that field goal. So he has restored the confidence in himself. He will come into this Mountain West Championship game in a week and then the playoffs in a few weeks. He will come into those games with the confidence we need to be able to be put in a key situation and win a game for us if we need that from him. Again, I don't like that Boise State didn't score touchdowns. I do like that he was given that opportunity. I almost made it a key to the game to give him an opportunity to work out his leg. I didn't because I didn't want to sound like I was saying we should intentionally not score touchdowns. But the fact that we had that opportunity, not because we wanted to, but it just happened that way. The fact that circumstances forced us to give him that opportunity, I think is a huge positive for Boise State. That's going to have a major benefit towards the team's performance going through the rest of the season. And then James Ferguson Reynolds, I kept trying to say his name a couple of times already because I just wanted to get to it. But 2 punts for 56 yards, long of 64, one of his longest of the season. I think he had his longest of the year versus Wyoming a couple of weeks ago, 67, I think. So maybe just underneath that number. One of his longest of the season. He definitely looked so good back half of the season, so confident. And that was a big part of that 64-yard punt. He held on to that punt for a long time. He let his gunners get all the way to when the punt actually landed. They landed in between, in between 2 of the Boise State players because he waited so long to punt it because he has that confidence. He knows he can get that ball out whenever he wants to. You're not going to be able to rush him. You rush him, he'll run upfield. So he might even convert a first down on you. And so I don't know if we've ever had a punter this confident and this good at the same time in Boise State history. He is definitely record-wise one of the best in school, the best in school history. And I think that you're seeing that every single game he gets better and better, especially towards the back half of this season. And he had another big performance tonight. And then overall for the kick return and punt return for Boise State, nothing super miraculous. Boise State did have a couple of attempts, just wasn't able to get anything going. But they didn't allow anything bad either. One kind of long, 30-ish yard kick return that was called back for holding on Oregon State, so it doesn't count statistically. I thought the kicks overall were pretty good. And the big thing is Oregon State tried a surprise onside kick, and Boise State recovered it. Number 28, I am Costi or something like that. I unfortunately did not write it down, and I'm going to have that name for you in the game preview because I owe that to you, Bronco Nation. I owe that to this young man for that incredible play. I really do apologize. But number 28, incredible job. Johnny on the spot. Ball comes right at him. He jumps on it and is able to recover. It would have been a huge momentum type of swing. Oregon State just scoring, of course, would have had an opportunity to go down and score again. And this is a completely different ball game. And so incredible performance. I will look up the pronunciation of that name and have it ready for the game preview and give it another shout out in that one. Amazing, great performance. So Boise State wins this game. It's a big win for them, 34-13. They followed my keys to the game pretty well overall. Take the pressure off the offensive line. We saw the deep ball being attempted. We saw a deep ball that should have been caught. We saw another a deep pass that was just incomplete, a little bit beyond Camper. And we saw another deep pass that wasn't so much of a lob, but more of a bullet, but could have been caught. And so Boise State, I said last game, even if it's incomplete, you have to throw the deep ball because you have to take that pressure off. You have to force the secondary to think about that possibility and back off and not be able to stand within 15 yards of the line of scrimmage every single play. And Boise State did that, and I think that showed dividends. They started, you saw the pitch out to Ashton Jennings, it was a 26-yard run. We haven't seen a lot of that this season. It's been effective when they have run it. We saw the option play with Maddox Matson there towards the end. Now, again, each of these are small elements. We saw a screen pass to the wide receiver. We saw another one to the tight end, which we've seen quite a lot this season. But we saw a screen pass to a wide receiver. That was Prince Strawn's one catch that he had. And so Boise State showing small elements, and I don't know if it's Dirk Cutter kind of restricting his offensive scheme. He's winning, so he's clearly not having to put it all on the table, but it looks like to me like he is somewhat restricting the playbook and saving it for something down the road, whether that's a championship or a playoff. And I hope that's the case because I think Boise State, they've shown they can be effective when they run the option, when they run the wide receiver screen, when they the throw the deep ball is the one element that I think they still need to work out some kinks on, but they at least showed that they can attempt it. When they pitch the ball outside, they've shown they can be successful on all of these things. And I think if we start seeing them more strung together, more repetitively throughout the game, you'd see a little bit more dominant performances here. So maybe it's just saving something. You're going to play a team you've already played once before. You want to have something that's 12 games worth of tape, and one of them versus that team. You want to have something that you can surprise them with, and so maybe that's where Dirk Cutter is doing there. But I thought overall it was a good attempt to take the pressure off the offensive line. I thought we saw a better performance. Yeah, a couple of holding calls. Boise State still kind of working things out. A couple players that have come back. Boise State did have another player in Mason Randolph who's warming up. I didn't see him in the game today, so I think he may still be out for another one. Hopefully he can get back into the Mountain Championship game. But obviously Carry On coming back last week. Still working through a little bit of rust. He had a holding call on him. Thought he played well overall, but had a holding call that was unfortunate. Those holding calls, you take those away. Ashton Jeanty runs for hit at least 50 yards worth of offense and a touchdown on holding calls taken away from him. So 270 plus yards of rushing and two touchdowns two touchdowns on the ground instead of the one if you take away the holding calls. But overall, I thought Boise State did a good job trying to take the pressure off the offensive line in this game. Key number 2 was score quickly. A+. Boise State did that. They came out, they scored quickly, they looked motivated. Good mix of the run and pass. Boise State getting out to a big lead, and that helped them win this game. Then leave no doubt. I'm not going to say they did that in this game. I think there is some doubt still. But they definitely looked like the more dominant team. They definitely looked like they were keeping Oregon State in the game through miscues. It was not Oregon State's performance that was allowing them to stick around. It was Boise State's unfortunate miscues that allowed Oregon State to hang around in this one. It should have been the 50 to 23 point score or less, 50 to 18 point score prediction that I was predicting there. But unfortunately, Boise State leaving some doubt, but also at the same time, doing away with some of that doubt. I mean, again, this was not the same team that we saw the last 3 games. This was an Oregon State team that is at least as good as Wyoming and Nevada. And I think you could argue, especially when you look at their roster, that they are as good or better than San Jose State. But overall, this was a Oregon State team that was definitely better than 2 of the teams that Boise State struggled against. And they didn't look like they struggled against them. It did look like they struggled to be dominant. It didn't look like they were struggling to win. And at a time, if you're late in the 4th and you are being able to kind of play around with the offense and try to achieve specific goals versus just going out there and scoring like Boise State did there on their second to last drive. It shows how much in hand the game is. And so Boise State definitely moving in the right direction, helping to fix some of those mistakes, some of those concerns that we've seen the last few weeks. But at the same time, this wasn't the Washington State game or the game versus Utah State or even San Diego State. This wasn't that dominant level performance that you would have liked to have seen. But overall, I'm going to give it a solid B. I think Boise State definitely performing well, but not elite or dominantly in this matchup. So again, that's the end of the review. Boise State wins. They head to the Mountain West Championship game. I can't wait to preview this game. It's going to be a live preview. We're going to have Ron Counts on to come and preview the game. I cannot wait. It's going to be a fantastic one. I hope everybody in Bronco Nation had a great Thanksgiving and are thankful for this coaching staff, are thankful for these players, and are thankful to have been able to be part of an 11-1 season again as a Boise State fan in this Bronco Nation. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue!